part of a series of webinars put together by Nonviolence International that we are all part of one another. And we are very fortunate today to have 5 phenomenal environmental activists, all women. And the first one who will speak with us today is Kehkashan Basu, and hopefully I got that correctly after my primer this morning. She's a climate, ecology, and human rights activist. She's a United Nations human rights champion, the youngest recipient of Canada's top 20 women of influence, the winner of the International Children's Peace Prize, and the founder president of the Green Hope Foundation. She's also the youth lead of Toronto St. Paul's Constituency Youth Council, the youngest recipient of the L'Oreal Paris Women of Worth Canada, a climate realty leader, a TEDx speaker, a youth ambassador of World Future, and a formal global coordinator of children and youth at the United Nations Environmental Program. Her organization works with young people and other sections of civil society in 15 countries, especially with marginalized youth and women fighting for the rights of women and children. And I believe you have a PowerPoint presentation that you'll be sharing with us, so we'll turn that over for her.
I'm hoping to do a little welcome first.
Oh yeah, sorry David.
No problem.
I'm just following my agenda and I missed that. Oh, sorry.
No problem. I am very much looking forward to hearing all of these wonderful speakers. It's a real joy to welcome you to the webinar. My name is David Hart. I'm the co-director of Nonviolence International. Everyone on this gathering knows that we're coming together at a critical moment in history. This global pandemic has once again revealed how broken our system is. The hope of this webinar series is that it will also remind us of our shared humanity. Since I heard about the amazing leaders who are joining us today, I've been reading about their work and feeling a strong sense of inspiration, which honestly was just what I needed right now. These women will impress you with their vision, their hard work, and their deep commitment to the earth and to justice. They know that we must come together as one and build a new path forward. Finding that path can seem hard to imagine in this moment of global crisis, but they show us the way. They light the path before us. And all we must do is learn to follow their lead. Our world is beautiful, deeply and powerfully beautiful. And it is also broken, profoundly broken. We believe that no force in the world, other than the great power of nonviolent collective action, has the capacity to bring about the changes we desire. Many of us have lamented our failures to fix our biggest problems. Yesterday, I joined my first ever car action in support of local high school students demonstrating for effective action on climate. One car I saw had a sign which read, 50 years of Earth Day, 10 years left to deal with the climate crisis. We must celebrate the real progress we've made, and we must recognize it was not enough, not close to enough. Yes, sadly, it is true. Future generations are being forced to fix what we have broken, and that's not fair. But what I'm glad to report to you is that after reading about each of these leaders, I am substantially more hopeful that we will somehow harness the power within and among us. They give me hope that even in this broken world, we will find that we are indeed all part of one another. We will not harness the strength we need with intellect alone. We need to harness the power of who we are at our core if we are to address the challenges before us. You can build a movement on fear, but you can only sustain and expand a movement on hope. And in this moment, fear is a reasonable response to the world around us. Today, you're going to hear a wide range of interconnected topics. You will learn about powerful examples of hope in hard times. Our impressive intergenerational panel will inspire you with their vision of what the world can be someday, but also with the bold, creative, nonviolent action they have taken in truly difficult situations. I have heard it said recently that no movement can save us. No movement has the power to bring about the changes the world so desperately needs. That might be right. But I say to you today that a global movement of movements is taking shape. Movements for climate justice, movements for peace, and reshaping our priorities to fund our real security, movements for the earth, and many more nonviolent movements around the world are coming together to declare that we have waited far too long, and we will wait no longer. I want to close by sharing some brief excerpts from a recent piece by Arundhati Roy. I urge all of you to read this piece online. Even while the virus proliferates, who could not be thrilled by the swell of birdsong in cities, peacocks dancing at traffic crossings, and the silence in the skies? The tragedy is immediate, real, epic, and unfolding before our eyes, but it is not new. It is the wreckage of a train that has been careening down the tracks for years. Coronavirus has made the mighty kneel and brought the world to a halt like nothing else could. Our minds are still racing back and forth, longing for a return to normality, trying to stitch our future to our past and refusing to acknowledge the rupture. But the rupture exists. And in the midst of this terrible despair, it offers us a chance to rethink the doomsday machine we have built for ourselves. Nothing could be worse than a return to normality. Historically, pandemics have forced humans to break with the past and imagine their world anew. This one is no different. It is a portal, a gateway between one world and the next. We can choose to walk through it, dragging the carcasses of our prejudice and hatred, our avarice, our data banks, our dead ideas, our dead rivers, and our smoky skies behind us. Or we can walk through lightly with little luggage, ready to imagine another world and ready to fight for it. Friends, let's walk through that portal together, following the lead of the amazing women you will hear from today. Back to you, Maya.
Wonderful. Thank you, David, and sorry for jumping ahead in the agenda. My apologies. So I will turn this over now to Kehkashan, who will share the screen, and I have a little timer going to keep us on track with the 9 minutes, and I will just give you a little signal through the chat box when you've got about a minute or so left. Okay?
Sounds good. Thank you very much. I am very excited to speak to all of you today, especially on such an auspicious day. So happy Earth Day to everyone. I will just share my screen now. Okay, so like Maya mentioned, I am a United Nations human rights champion. I'm from Toronto, Canada, and I am the founder president of the Green Hope Foundation. So we are in the age of the Anthropocene, and that is basically the human epoch that is evolving as an age of ecological violence and destruction, and on an unprecedented scale. And that is leading to societal damage as well. And it is directed at the world's most vulnerable communities. And on one hand, we have technological innovations that are probably going to send people to Mars soon. And at the same time, we have our human footprint on every aspect of nature. And you have hyperconnectivity on one side, social change, human migration and war, and climate change, all of which are interconnected. And we are basically we're at a time of global destruction, global systemic destruction, and that's even worse, with natural and social worlds completely out of balance and in varying degrees of agony. And all of this, in terms of human suffering, it causes a lack of place, a lack of identity, and confusion. And basically, as you can see on my slide, there are a few statistics. So you have 9.1 million people every year, according to the FAO, from starvation and hunger. People die, 9.1 million people. And the COVID-19 pandemic, that's taken about 180,000 people already, but already every day in the world, the tuberculosis bacteria causes 4,000 deaths. So we are very concerned with our healthcare system right now, but our healthcare system has not done anything to stop all of these deaths from diseases that we were supposed to take care of years before COVID-19 came into place. And 165 million children, that is a number of children who do not go to school, but are instead working in sweatshops as bonded labor. So this inequity really has to change. And that is the vision of my organization, Green Hope Foundation. And it's a global social innovation enterprise that I founded when I was 12 years old to provide the world's most vulnerable children with a platform of empowerment, turning them into agents who bring about change through action. And in all my years in the sustainable development process, I'm 19 now, and I've been working in this field for the last 11 years, I have seen the amount of passion and enthusiasm that these children have, no matter where they are. And with them, we work on using education for sustainable development as a transformative tool so that no matter where they are able to learn about the behaviors, attitudes, values required to think and act for a sustainable future, so that together they can learn to build a better earth than today's. So I developed an advocacy tool called Environment Academy, and they're all organized by children and youth for children and youth. And here we engage them in peer-to-peer communication, and that has proven really effective because together they're able to learn about topics that might be a little difficult for them to understand, but topics like climate change, biodiversity loss, social inequity, gender inequality, carbon footprint, but working in a peer-to-peer communication environment really helps them to grasp what the situation is like and what they can do to tackle these problems. Now, we work globally in 15 countries and have reached out to more than 57,000 people, young people. And obviously, we face language and social barriers because of that. So we use really creative methods of communication, such as art in the form of art workshops, art competitions. We use dance, so that's in the form of flash mobs. We use music. So Green Hope has a band where we sing, rap, beatbox, play different instruments, compose our own songs. And it's so amazing to see that during our academies, no matter where the children are, what language they speak, music is the one thing that just brings them all together. And it's truly amazing to see the expressions and what the ideas that they come up with on how to achieve a sustainable world. We use sport and we use soccer and cricket. We use drama as a way to spread awareness. And all of these activities, they work at the same time with our ground level actions. So armed with the knowledge that the children gain at our academies, they then venture out into their local areas and become agents of change who are taking local ground level actions. And these have resulted in us planting over 58,000 trees all across the world. We've planted more than 5,000 mangroves, cleaned up over 150 beaches worldwide, recycled over maybe 100,000 kgs of waste. And it's truly amazing to see the actions that the children take, no matter where they are, and the enthusiasm that they have to build a better earth and continue to move towards a sustainable future. And like I said before, we've reached out to over 57,000 young people, and our main goal is to move towards grassroots level action and lead a bottom-up approach to the implementation of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and work on localizing these Sustainable Development Goals so that every child and every person in the world can take that local action and realize that one solution does not fit all. So they take that local actions, share best practices, and that culminates to form this global movement where every single person moves towards sustainable development. So through all of our actions, we seek to empower and engage with the world's most marginalized children. So that includes refugees, children of prisoners, HIV positive children, and those in orphanages. So we spent Christmas of 2018 in Kutupalong, which is the world's largest refugee camp, and it's home to over 1.3 million Rohingya refugees. And when we went over there, that was literally the definition of misery, because we saw that they lived in horrible, cramped conditions with about 30,000 ramshackle huts. They're just crammed together on a hilly terrain. You had, like, every week we learned that there were 50 births, but most of the children did not survive their first week. But when we conducted the workshop for the children over there, it was wonderful to see that they had so much enthusiasm to wish for a better future for themselves and for children across the world. And these children didn't know how to read and write, so art was the main way for them to express their ideas, and they came up with such amazing artwork. And a very similar thing happened just when we went a year before that to the Syrian refugee camp on the border of Lebanon and Syria, where it was, the trauma of war was clearly visible on their faces. But at the same time, through music and rap, they were able to break out of that shell and express their ideas. And that was truly amazing to see. Now, you have these two images.
And Kehkashan, this is wonderful, but I'm going to ask you if you can wrap it up.
It's the last slide.
Wonderful, thank you.
These are, like I said, there are two pictures of children where we've, and places where we've conducted our workshops. The one at the top is the children at an orphanage in Bali who had lost their parents to the Bali bombings. And down below, you have children at a school here in Toronto. And the question is, why should the children, the experiences of the children up above be so different from the children in Toronto? What is their fault? Why should they have a future so different that has mindless violence and just being the injustice of being born in a country, a third world country, where they have to depend on charity for their next meal? And this disparity, this inequity, and this opportunity gap has to be bridged if we are to achieve peace and sustainability. And that is the ultimate objective of the Sustainable Development Goals. And that is my mission as well, to facilitate and create a world where no one is left behind. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful and incredibly inspiring. My son is 13 and I can't imagine him starting his own nonprofit globally at a year ago, let alone this year or next. So that's very inspirational. Thank you so much. Our next speaker, Raeesah Noor-Mahomed, is a 17-year-old activist from Johannesburg, South Africa. In September 2019, she co-founded Artivists, a youth-led movement which does public performance art pieces to raise awareness about climate change. In January 2020, she began to boycott school every Friday in a demand for the South African Department of Environmental Affairs to declare climate emergency, and was able to attend a youth dialogue with the Minister of Environmental Affairs. Raeesah is currently the head of the Stage for Change, a movement seeking to provide a platform for people's voices to be heard and collectively demand change through the use of art. So Raeesah, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Maia. Hello, as Maia said, I'm from Johannesburg, South Africa. And South Africa has had a very tumultuous past, and we've had a long history of protest action. So during apartheid, from the beginning of apartheid to the end of apartheid, there were different forms of resistance. It was at first it was passive resistance, which proved to be ineffective. So we shifted to active resistance. And then when that proved to be ineffective as well, we shifted to militant. And that is how apartheid ended. Now, when I met with the Minister of Environmental Affairs and tried to speak to her, she told me that my movement wasn't big enough and we needed to fight climate change like they fought apartheid. But see, the thing is with apartheid, it was very clear who was in the wrong. It was a government and a system that needed to be taken down and overthrown. In the climate movement, we are all going to suffer. Although it is the people who contributed to the least that are going to suffer the most. Meeting the minister was very eye-opening. I thought that that once people knew what was happening, they'd make a change, especially the Minister of Environmental Affairs, who's supposed to make a change. But she told us that it's the youth's job to change public perception. In a country like South Africa, not everyone has the privilege to be able to prioritize climate change. If they don't know where their next meal is coming from, how are they supposed to change their diet and alter their way of living? And if you don't know how to pay your rent, or you don't have a home, you're not going to worry about using plastic. And so I found that remark to be ignoring people's state and just totally ignoring the fact that it's the industries to blame and not the people. But she was right in saying that the movement needed to be bigger and we needed to collectivize. The thing is, in developing countries, I don't like using the word developing, but in countries such as South Africa, not everyone has the same access to internet as in Western countries. In Western countries, the climate strikes are massive, but here, because not everyone is able to care and not everyone has access, our strikes are smaller. And so I figured that we've got to go to the people. We can't wait for people to come to us. And marches won't help. Well, marches are good if you're aiming your message to the industries. But for people who need to get to work and find that they're blocked, it's ineffective. And so when I founded Artivist, I did it with the intention of doing public performance art pieces in order to raise awareness. And art has been used as a tool over the centuries to unite people and connect people. And by doing public performance art pieces, people will be curious. They'll come to us themselves. And in that curiosity, we connect with them. We've done these pieces in different parts of Johannesburg, in the richer areas and in the middle of town where the people aren't as wealthy. And funnily enough, in town, the people were much more receptive. But there's a sense of hopelessness within everybody. Everyone I spoke to, they said, I admire your initiative, but nothing's going to happen. And the government doesn't care. As we spoke to them, and we explained that we know that they don't care, but we need to make them care. And slowly, people are convinced and they are converted and they join the movement. Even though they don't have access online, they're doing their own thing. And it's surprising, as you walk through town, how many people on the side of the road selling the necklaces, they use recyclable materials. They're actually very eco-friendly. And they're not receiving any funding at all. So people tend to underestimate how much people know. And what has been spoken about a lot recently, but not enough, is the fact that Africa is not spoken about enough in the climate context. Like what happened with Vanessa, by taking away her voice, you're taking away a whole continent. And the fight for us is very different to the fight in developed countries. In developed countries, you're fighting for the industries to listen. But here we're fighting for water, we're fighting for food. And we need to get an education, and we need to get those basic rights first in order to get people to care about climate and in order to sort out the climate crisis. And in order to do that, we need to unite people. The government didn't seem to understand that we didn't want to fight them. It was strange that it was the government who encouraged the fighting, the government who saw death and who were imprisoned for fighting the apartheid regime encouraged us to do the same. They wanted us to fight them. But they didn't seem to understand we don't want to fight. We can't fight. We don't want death. We want to unite people. It is so important to unite people all over the world. Vanessa. Oh, okay. Someone's asking who is Vanessa. So, was it this year? Was it Davos? There was a photo of Greta Thunberg and 4 other white activists, and Vanessa was in that photo. But then when it was released by media, Vanessa, a Ugandan activist, was cropped out. And this caused a massive stir because they cropped her out, which was a disgusting move. But also, by cropping out an activist from Uganda, you're taking away the fact that she was there and she's representing a country. You're taking away her country. You're taking away her continent. I think it's not spoken about enough that the developing countries' fight is much different. And I think what developed countries need to do is to give developing countries the platform.
Well, thank you, Raeesah, for sharing that the story and for reminding us about the stark differences between what activism looks like in different parts of the world. That's one theme that we're starting to see in these presentations today. So thank you very much. Our next speaker is Tamara Lorincz, and hopefully I pronounced that correctly, and if not, please correct me, is a PhD candidate in global governance at the Basu School for International Affairs at Wilfrid Laurier University. She's a master's in international politics and security studies from the University of Bradford and in the UK, and a law degree and MBA specializing in environmental law and management from Dalhousie University. Her research is on the climate and environmental impacts of the military. She's a member of the Canadian Voice of Women for Peace and the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. Tamara's also in the advisory committee of the Global Network Against Weapons and Nuclear Power in Space and the No to NATO Network. She was involved in the international 2019 No to NATO mobilization and started the monthly protests against NATO in Toronto in 2019. And I believe you also have slides to share with us on the screen. So I will turn that over to you to share your screen and set your timer. Thanks.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me and can you see my slides? Great. So happy Earth Day. Yes, I'm Tamara Lorincz from Waterloo, Ontario, Canada. I'm a member of the Canadian Voice of Women for Peace, Canada's oldest women's feminist peace organization in the country. We also have transnational links to other women's peace organizations in other countries, like Code Pink in the United States, and the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, WILP, that's based in Switzerland. And we're also members of Women Walk the DMZ to bring peace to the Korean Peninsula. I would like to begin by acknowledging a terrible tragedy that happened in my country last weekend. You might have seen the headlines in newspapers around the world. One of the worst mass shootings took place in the province of Nova Scotia on the East Coast. 22 people were killed, and in Canada we are all heartbroken by this. This type of gun violence is very rare in Canada, yet it's connected to a continuum of violence. From the domestic to the international. There is a connection between handgun violence on the streets in Canada and the violence of Canadian tanks and fighter jets overseas. 10 days before the mass shooting, Canada resumed selling weapons to Saudi Arabia. Canada has a $15 billion deal to sell light armored vehicles, combat tanks, plus guns to the kingdom. And as you know, Saudi Arabia is engaged in a brutal war in Yemen. And before the pandemic, it was considered the worst humanitarian crisis in the world. Canadian weapons are involved in this war. Canada is one of the top 20 arms exporters in the world. Canada is also ranked 14th highest in the world for military spending, according to the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, SIPRI, that you can see on the chart in front of you. The largest arms fair in North America, CANSEC, takes place in the capital of Canada every spring. All the big weapons manufacturers like Lockheed Martin, General Dynamics, Boeing, Saab, BAE, they all come to Ottawa. The organization that I'm with, the Canadian Voice of Women for Peace, VOW, has been working for the cancellation of arms exporters and the closing down of the arms fair for many years. For 6 decades, VOW has tried to use creative ways to promote peace, nonviolence, and disarmament at home and abroad. We have educational peace campaigns. We run summer peace camps for women, young and old, and we take a delegation of women to the United Nations Commission on the Status of Women conference in New York City every spring. We do lobbying and petitioning, organizing, event planning, rallying, and protesting. On the climate emergency, we have a campaign, Demilitarize, Decarbonize, Stop the Wars, Stop the Warming. And we are partnering with environmental groups like Extinction Rebellion to raise awareness about the fact that the military is the largest institutional consumer of fossil fuels and the largest emitter of carbon emissions in the world. It's also one of the worst polluters as well. We also have a campaign, Feminists Against Militarism, Women Say No to NATO. We are trying to challenge the military alliance that constantly pushes us to increase military spending, and it provokes a violent conflict all around the world. And we are connecting with other women's and peace organizations on this campaign. We believe that NATO is one of the greatest threats to the climate and to the environment. Next year, the Canadian Voice of Women for Peace is partnering with other organizations across the country and the international organization called World Beyond War to organize a major protest to shut down CANSEC and to hold a big peace conference Ottawa next June. One of our speakers, we're having lots of high-level, fantastic activists coming from all over the world, including Medea Benjamin, who was on this call last week. And so I invite you all to come next June. The theme of our conference is Divest, Disarm, and Demilitarize, Conversion for a Peaceful, Green, and Just Future. This is our vision and this is our hope. With this pandemic and unprecedented lockdown, we see that people are starting to question what is essential, and they're challenging militarism, high military spending, and the manufacturing of weapons when many countries don't have adequate medical supplies. A few days ago, Mikhail Gorbachev, the former president of the Soviet Union, wrote an important piece in Time magazine where he called for demilitarization and a reduction of military spending. And he said we need global cooperation to deal with our common challenges. And his words echo the Earth Charter. This is an initiative that he spearheaded many years ago, and the Earth Charter is the ethical foundation for sustainable development, for the UN Sustainable Development Goals. The Charter calls for demilitarization for a just and peaceful society. UNESCO approved the Earth Charter in 2000. Finally, the Canadian Voice of Women for Peace is a member of the International Peace Bureau, and we are part of a global campaign against military spending. So we want to reduce military spending and move it to our urgent environmental and social needs, including achieving the UN Sustainable Development Goals and including achieving the Paris Agreement. Every year, the global community spends $1.8 trillion on military spending, and we believe that needs to be invested in caring for the earth and caring for each other. So on Earth Day today, we have this graphic that we hope that you'll share on your social media feeds. Military spending costs us the earth. You can see the points there on your screen. You can see the handle for the International Peace Bureau below, and also the hashtags healthcare, not warfare, act on climate, not war, and move the money. So thank you very much for letting me share. And this call has been very inspirational, and I hope that you'll take action for Earth Day today. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Tamara. I'm sorry to mispronounce your name in the introduction too. This is really wonderful to see all of this work that all of you are doing. Our next speaker comes from the other side of the planet. We've had two from Canada, two speakers based in Canada, one from South Africa, and now we're going to move to Korea, where Juhee Lee is a former intern from Nonviolence International, and she's an activist at the Korean Climate Change Center. She's a recent graduate of Hankook University and Foreign Studies, Yongin, South Korea, with a double major in English interpretation and translation and media communications. So I will turn it over to you now, Juhee.
Hello, good morning. Actually, I should say good night here in South Korea. It is very late night in Korea, so it's almost midnight. First of all, I would like to thank Nonviolence International and all the participants for giving me the opportunity to join the global solidarity to celebrate the 50th anniversary of Earth Day. There are words that you might think of when you South Korea, but among them, I think BTS is the most famous thing from young people all over the world. So today, I'm going to start with a video released by BTS on Earth Day. As a child, I believed that every beautiful scene in this video was my present and future. But like all over years, I realized that this was not true. When I first heard about the climate crisis and the future of mankind is at stake, my response was that, isn't this a movie? The fall of humanity due to global warming sounded like a movie scenario. But in the news and in the newspapers, reliable data came out of the scientists, and my response changed like that. Well, then it's all over. I thought it was too late to change the world. I gradually came to believe in true despair, not first hope. But now, I believe true hope that we can create a sustainable world by protecting our planet, our Earth, and protecting our future. It was the young climate activists around the world and the young teenagers who gave me the real hope. The fact and data that politicians and scientists said often brought me a sense of helplessness. However, the behavior and voices of young teenagers gave me hope. It's because their brave, willing, and steady activities have given me confidence that we will be able to lead our future correctly. And in Korea, more and more people think like me. This was demonstrated in the parliamentary election, which was held in Korea on April 15th. There are many unusual things about this election. It was the first time that an 18-year-old teenager voted in Korea. Previously, only legal adults aged 19 or older had the right to vote. But the election law was revised to allow even 1 year younger to participate in elections. So I could see a teenager wearing a uniform for the first time in my life. And second, the election result also changed. The younger friends voted and the younger politician was born. Korea has become the first lawmakers in their 20s, and of the total 3 lawmakers in their 20s, and 2 of them are women, and the other is the same age as me, who is 70 years old. And politics is no longer just an area for older people in the world. So teenagers and 20s are now able to speak their voices, not only in street or school, but also in the National Assembly to make their voice as a legal reality. So this shows that young people in Korea will be able to create a more advanced and sustainable future. For all these reasons, I now fully understand that the true power of young people around the world and in Korea. And I hope someday Korea will become famous not only for BTS, but also for its green girls and young readers who lead it. Thank you for hearing me. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Juhee. Our final speaker now is, we will turn to Phyllis Omido, who is a Kenyan environmental activist. She was one of 6 people to be awarded the Goldman Environmental Prize in 2015. and she's known for organizing protests against a lead smelting plant located in the middle of Owino Uhuru, a slum near Mombasa. The plant was causing lead poisoning by raising the lead content in the environment, killing residents, in particular children, and harming others, including her own child. The plant was ultimately closed. She's the founder of the Center for Justice, Governance, and Environmental Action. And I will turn the floor over to her now, or the screen.
I started my work in 2010 on the issue of used lead acid battery recycling in Africa. For many years, Africa has been the recipient of a lot of toxic chemicals like lead. Lead recyclers would come to Kenya, import batteries from all around the world, and what they would do is they would break it up and remove lead and export 100% pure lead out of Africa. What it left behind in Kenya is a lot of health and environment repercussions for the communities that lived around these smelters. I was unlucky enough to work in one of these smelters, and a few months into my work, I realized that the work we were being exposed to was very toxic. There was no proper PPE given to the workers, and the health burden, I experienced the health burden firsthand when my son also was exposed to lead poisoning. When we started this advocacy, I was very naive in that I believed that maybe people did not understand the meaning of what was happening. Maybe the government did not know what was happening. But when I tried to write letters to government, I tried to approach state agencies to tell them that something was seriously wrong. The environment was being polluted, the health of more than 3,000 community members just around where the smelter where I was working for was being compromised. They were being exposed to lead poisoning. I was met with very harsh backlash that I had not expected. I was actually arrested and arraigned in court for inciting violence and illegal gathering. That is when I realized that environmental activism is not a bed of roses. At that time, I did not call myself an environmental activist because I did not know what an environmental activist was. Actually, it's the media that started writing about the work that I was doing and calling me an environmental activist. Until 2012, I kept denying and saying, no, I'm not an environmental activist. I'm just trying to say that there's something wrong and people are being poisoned and the government should act. But fast forward to 2020, and government still hasn't done anything about the issue of lead poisoning in Uhuru. I still have 3,000 people that were poisoned. I tried to go to Parliament to put in a petition. I tried to go to Senate to put in a petition. Both houses wrote very rosy reports for me saying, yes, there is lead poisoning. And the lead poisoning that happened in Uhuru, if you compare it to Flint, Michigan, where the highest was around 35 micrograms per deciliter of lead in blood, Uhuru highest was 420 micrograms per deciliter of lead in blood. Well, WHO defines lead poisoning at 5 micrograms per deciliter of lead in blood. And therefore you can see how huge and how extreme the poisoning was in the community. After pushing for action from government, we even managed to get the UN to pass a resolution on used battery acid recycling in Africa. Still nothing has been done for the Uhuru community. We have had to put in a class action suit in court where we are challenging the responsibility of both government and the non-state actors on the protection of the right to a clean and healthy environment, where we are asking the court, first of all, for declarations on procedural environmental rights. Was access to information given to the community? Were they given prior information about what was going on, and did they consent to having the smelter located in their community? Second of all, we are asking the court for declarations on public participation. Was the community able to participate in the EIA process, that is the environmental impact assessment process, before setting up the industry. And then third, we are asking government and both the corporations to clean up the community, where they have left a huge health bill that the community still faces until today. We have had over 30 children who have died. We have adults who have had miscarriages and had their wombs removed because of the excess lead in their blood. We have had those that have died during childbirth. Some have died because their bodies could not handle the amount of lead that they were exposed to. We thought that this was an issue that happened in Kenya only, but in 2015, we did a study in 5 countries in Africa, and we realized some of them had even worse cases, up to 600 micrograms per deciliter of lead in blood. I recently went to Germany, and I was amazed to see how life was going on normally, and people are driving Guzzlers with big batteries. And I tried to inquire from the public to know whether they understood where the clean batteries, the lead acid batteries that they are using, where the lead came from, where it was recycled from. And most of them did not know, or just were oblivious to what was happening to our part of the world. So we've been working on this issue. We are still in court. We are waiting for a ruling from court on our case. Both the Kenyan Senate and Kenyan Parliament wrote very rosy reports saying, yes, they did their own tests. Yes, there was lead poisoning and someone is culpable. But of course, they failed to tell us who's culpable, and they told us to go to court, hoping that maybe we would not have enough resources to go to court. Thankfully, we've been in court since 2016 up to 2019, November. That's when our class action suit was concluded, and now we're waiting for the ruling from court. I think I'll close it there because I'm afraid of losing you again because of my network.
Thank you so much, Phyllis. I'm really glad that we were able to hear a little bit of your own voice and your powerful story. Indeed, I think all of the speakers today have really highlighted global inequalities, have highlighted the different needs facing environmental activists and communities in the global north and the global south, since, as you said, the problems of developing and developed world are all highly problematic. Global north, global south, also kind of problematic. But I think the other theme that really comes through very clearly in these messages is the distrust of governments and the fact that governments have not always been following up with the best needs of their communities. And I think there's a growing distrust in some communities of what the government is doing and how well they are really responding to environmental concerns. And it's inspiring to see all of the individual women here and their communities who have really taken it into their own hands to work for change from the bottom up. We'll have a little bit of question and answer.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much for the opportunity. My question is with Juhee. Just I heard your presentation. Juhee, I had the opportunity to visit your country once. I had an interaction with the Korean National Defense University. By the way, I am from New York, Nonviolence International. So Juhee, you talk about the environmental issues, but my question is a little bit related, not directly related to the environment, but it is related to the recent pandemic. You know, the South Korea is an unique example in the world to control this pandemic very, very praiseworthy and nice way. As per your view, what are the key factors that has bring this success for the South Korea for controlling the pandemic of COVID-19? What's your view? Just I would like to get your view about it.
I'm sorry, I cannot understand your question, so could you say that again?
Okay, my question is related that South Korea is an example of success for controlling the COVID-19 pandemic. So as per your opinion or your views, what are the reasons or what are the key factors that have contributed for this success?
Okay, I think it is really hard to choose only one key factors of our success, but the most important thing is kind of sharing their information and thoughts on using different ways, such as using some social medias and making some funny videos about politics, not about music videos, but about politics and our environment and our society. It is the most important thing. And this day, Korean young people are interested in sharing their thoughts about politics or their society using social network services. But yeah, I think that's the most important thing.
Hi, this is exciting to hear all this young energy. I wanted to hear more from Raeesah from South Africa. I was excited to hear about the public performance art pieces and how they use them to bring people together, but I'd like to hear more about that. How do you get people to come together? What are those art pieces? Could you just talk more about that, please?
Definitely. Okay, so I'll talk about the first one we did. We set up a dinner table in a mall and we put plastic on the plate, and for 4 hours straight we pretended to eat plastic, and like with completely straight faces. And this was based on the fact that when all the animals and the plants and fish are gone, what will be left is plastic. And if you're walking through a mall and then you see this kid sitting and eating plastic, you're gonna wonder what it's about. And I'm not sure about everywhere else in the world. I know Europe doesn't normally do this, but the US tends to be friendly. South Africans, we're very friendly. If we see someone in public and they look strange or something, we'll go to them. Like, people go to you and they ask you questions. But that was in a mall. When I went into town, there's this area called the Maboneng precinct. It's a very arty area in the center of town, and we made plague masks. Funnily enough, this was just before Corona hit South Africa. We made plague masks out of 2-liter plastic bottles, and this was based on the fact that the Black Plague was one of the biggest extinctions of humanity, and the next biggest, well, we thought the next biggest extinction would be the climate plague. And so we walked around in all black with posters explaining what we were doing and these bottles over our faces. And as we walked around, again, South Africans are very friendly. And since Maboneng is such an arty precinct, so many people approached us and talked to us and asked us what it was about and asked us if they could join. And there was a concert on that day in the precinct, and we went there and they put us on the stage. That was pretty cool. And like that, even if people are just curious, they start learning, and that's how I find that the performance art pieces have really drawn people to us, because they become curious, they want to know more, and they want to engage, and so they're less likely to deny it. That makes sense. Does that answer your question?
Thank you so much. That was amazing. Keep up the good work.
Thank you. I see there's another question in the comments. It was private. It says, how did you begin your activism, and what other advice do you have for someone else aiming to pursue environmental activism at a young age? So I began by attending climate protests, and shortly after my first climate protest, I formed my art group. And the climate activists in South Africa, it's a very close group, because there's quite a lot of us now, but it's still not as many as other countries. So I had a lot of help there. And then how I really grew my activism was this year, with the Australia fires. So let me tell you a bit about South Africa's ecosystem. South Africa and Australia have very similar ecosystems, and we have a lot of potential for fires because of the hot, dry winds that occur downhill and the really, really dry veldt, and especially with the drought we're going through. And I figured that if I'm 17. I don't have a degree. I don't have anything. If I can know this, then surely someone in the government must know this. Why aren't they doing anything about it? And so I lost my temper a bit, and I sent a message to our Department of Environmental Affairs, pulling a Greta basically, and saying that I had a whole list of demands of things they could do, but my biggest demand was for them to declare a climate emergency, and that I would boycott school every Friday until they do so. And while I know that they don't care about me or my education, I needed to do something drastic to get media's attention. And because of the Australia fires, South African media were very, they really wanted to hear more about climate activism. So I just got my timing right. And so because of the media, the local media that had got it, put pressure on the government to respond. And that's how I really propelled my activism, by just tossing myself into that situation.
So I'm not seeing any questions. Would anybody like to share any environmental activism that they are doing themselves, or something that is giving them inspiration on this Earth Day?
We formed a group at our church in Kelowna, BC. It's called Creation, Caring for Creation. And we are basically in line with the global Catholic climate movement. But it's very difficult right now. We can't have meetings. And so we're sort of on hold, but I'm looking around and seeing so many birds and a bluer sky. And I'm hearing this from my relatives in California, that they see birds that they haven't seen in years. And I think it's a hopeful sign that perhaps people will, after this pandemic quiets down, they'll notice that what a difference it made for the Earth not to be traveling all over the world, and not to be driving your cars so much. And the oil, the oil market has just taken a huge dive. So that should be a message to us that that industry is done, and we really need to focus on another way of heating our homes and running our internet, etc. And also, it was new to me to know how active Canada is in the arms trade. I am horrified. That brings me to tears. So that's all.
Thank you very much for sharing. Indeed, my friends and I have been remarking on how different the sky looks where we are north of Atlanta, which is one of the worst commuting cities. It's profoundly different. Thank you very much for sharing. Does anybody else have something they would like to share? Yes, Jonathan.
Yeah, I've been very impressed with how powerful a jolt this pandemic has given to the entire world community. The fact that it highlighted how absolutely interdependent we are on each other, how we really need to strengthen international organizations to deal with these crises, how it was just almost like a warning from Mother Nature that our trajectory of increased spending, increased consumerism, increased industrialization is untenable, and that we really need to pause and think again about Mother Earth, about this world that we are living in, that we are polluting increasingly, and that we are not caring for. The fact that if this virus was a problem, think what climate change is going to be, which hits everybody in every country at every level, and which may be irreversible, for which there is no vaccine that we can just hold off for a few weeks or months until we create a vaccine and conquer it and go back to life as normal. We will never go back to life as normal. This is a wake-up call for us, especially when it comes to issues of the environment and climate change, and the need to act collectively as a human race in a way that we have not been acting so far. So it's really, I think, an important wake-up call. I expect that it will have a lot of impact on how we deal with things in the future, particularly on the issues of the environment.
Yes, thank you very much, Jonathan. Indeed, it's kind of ironic that at a time where we're all sort of sheltering in place, the need for interconnection is made all the more obvious, even as it proves more challenging. And as we see with the challenges of the internet and phones and everything can be great ways of connecting, but they also highlight the digital divide that we have as well, and other ways that global inequalities affect our lived realities. And I would say, I think our speakers did a great job noting the differences between, for example, children in Bali and children in Toronto. But I would say even in my children's own school district, I mean, we're in a Title I school district, which means that we have a number of children who rely on schools for meals. And this move to virtual learning has really accentuated and aggravated the divides that we see even in our own communities and in very privileged countries. I think and in Georgia, where I am, we can see the inequities in terms of how COVID-19 is affecting different populations, where geographically the healthcare services are non-existent, and how different people are experiencing this pandemic in very different ways that reflect different intersectional identities. Okay, I see that Maklukar has another question, but I want to just make sure no one else has a question that hasn't asked yet. Okay, Maklukar, I will send it to you then.
I would like to share one news in the America out of the so many bad news. So the good news is that I was watching the news and I found one news in this morning that Los Angeles or the LA has the cleanest year so far. And today is the cleanest year, you know. So that this COVID-19 brought so many sorrows and miseries for us. But one good news is that as the less vehicles are plying on the road, there is less pollution of the gases. We have the clean air. So I'm very much in line with the discussion of Mr. Jonathan that we need one another. But the problem is that when the top political leaders, those who are leading the nations, making the decision for the people, if they are so greedy about their money or the economy that they totally ignore the environment, they totally ignore the ozone layer depletions or what's happening in the Antarctica and how it's going on, then we, the people of the world, those who are not in a position to make such a decision, are handicapped of them. So it is the global leaders, those are leading different powerful nations, countries in Asia, in America, in Europe. They should have the realization actually that how this nature is gonna be in future. And I, being a student of chemistry, I really feel sorry when I see that the political leaders, they get the news that Antarctica ice are melting, ozone layer is depleting, cancer is in the race, but they don't have anything. They think for their economy, we should burn more fuel, more fossils, more coal, more oil to get. So I think this is the time that world leaders or those who are thinking, scientists and everybody's, that they need to think that we need the alternative source of energy, not the fossils, maybe the solars and all those things, to keep our mother nature safe for our children's, for our generations to come.
So I think we're very close to the end of time, and we said we were going to have 1 minute for each speaker to wrap things up. I think maybe we can just for ease go in the same order of presentation. So if Kehkashan, you want to start with a 1 minute response, and then we'll just go in order.
If we really want to achieve a sustainable future, then we need to just stop talking and shouting slogans and instead move towards ground level action now more than ever before. And we really need to stop blaming others and ask ourselves, what have I done to achieve a sustainable world? And your conscience will give you the answer, and that will prompt you to go out there and take that extra step and walk that extra mile to get that sustainable future that we all want. Thank you.
So nice to be able to connect with people from everywhere and learn what people knew. And I found it really amazing that people were so interested in the activism and the performing arts. I've always been really interested in the arts, and for me, my activism and my mental health and my life, they intertwine completely. I can't separate them. So seeing this just makes me feel so happy and so hopeful for the world, because art is a connector and I feel so connected.
Thank you very much to Nonviolence International for hosting this webinar and inviting me. I really appreciated being on this panel with other women that are doing incredible environmental work and activism and showing incredible leadership and courage. I also want to say that I'm really impressed by all of the examples of mutual aid and solidarity that I'm seeing during this pandemic. I just want to bring to your attention, if you didn't notice in the news, that Russia sent supplies to medical supplies to Italy and to the United States, and they put on the boxes with love. And that's really what should be motivating us, love for each other. And this pandemic is not only a portal, it's another possibility, I believe, for a peace dividend and for us to make friends with our enemies. It's really so critical for us not to believe that there are any enemies. We need to make friends with everybody. That's how we're going to achieve the Paris Agreement and the UN Sustainable Development Goals, by being friends, by cooperating and working in love. So thanks everyone again.
Grateful to have been able to join, even though I was disrupted a lot by the internet here. I would just like to say that even though it's a very challenging time, but I think this is also a time of great opportunity for us who are working in the environmental sector. It is the time for our voices to be heard clearly at this time, because there's no time like now when the whole world is focused on this pandemic and the effects that it's having globally. This is an open opportunity for us to come together globally to address issues and to take a stand on issues that are affecting us, not just individually, but globally. Issues that, for example, in our area now, we are really working hard to raise the issue of lead poisoning and how it's affecting Africa. But it would help if we had also voices from the West taking a stand for Africa and for the issues that are affecting us. Because in the long run, there's no time like this that has proven that we are interconnected. There's no way that anyone can work in isolation. There's no way that one person can be safe while the other one is not. I think the pandemic has brought this out very clearly, that we are a global community. It's all for one and one for all, for everyone right now. So I'm very grateful to have been on this platform. And my call to action is, let's unite and ensure that our voices are heard now more than ever. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Phyllis, and I'm glad we were able to hear your voice as one of the voices today. Thank you for persisting and persevering to make that happen. Next week at the same time, Wednesday morning Eastern time, 10:30 to noon. I don't know what time zone that is, and all of the different time zones all of you are on. Only what time zone it is for me personally, I apologize. But we will focus on creative nonviolent response to COVID-19 crisis in Palestine. Jonathan Katab, who's still with us here, and Mubarak Awad, one of the founders of Nonviolence International, will host, and they will feature amazing partners of Nonviolence International, including Anne Wright, who David pointed out in one of the pictures earlier in one of the presentations today, who was part of the Gaza Freedom Flotilla. So please join and help spread the word about this next week's webinar. And now I want to thank you very much for all joining us. And thank you. It was wonderful and inspiring for me to hear all of your stories and to hear what everyone is doing in this time. I would ask now that in the spirit of global cooperation and breaking down walls and building connections, that we all unmute, say goodbye, and some kind of inspirational greeting that you would like to do or closing at the same time.
Bye. Happy Earth Day.
Bye.
Everybody.
Bye. Goodbye.
Yes, everyone.
Do
Bye.
this together.
Bye.
Together.
Thank you, everybody.
Together we can do it.
Together. Together.
My face?
Oh, give me 1 second. I have another meeting. Wait, did they meet?
To all the presenters.
Oh, just come. This is my father. He is very proud.
Oh, wonderful.
You should be very proud.
You should be
very
wonderful. That was
You were
wonderful. Thank
wonderful.
you so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Take
Thank you.
care.
You too.